Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Indie Game Movement, the podcast that talks about the marketing and business of indie games. I'm Andrew Pappas, your host again, and this is episode 105, where we talk about the struggles of standing out as an indie dev. Now, no matter what indie devs do to try to stand out, it's always going to be a struggle. So whether you need funding or are trying to break through the advertising clutter or simply just want a sustainable living, it's always going to be an uphill battle. So thankfully, today's guest can relate to a lot of this and shares what strategies and tricks she has learned along the way to make great strides and stand out as a slightly bigger, more colorful fish in a big pond. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, right here on Indie Game Movement. Hey everyone, thanks again for joining us, and today I have Meredith Hall of Ultimerse. Meredith, how's it going, and thanks for joining.
No, thank you for having me. It's going well. Busy as always, but very, very good. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. All right, so for those of you who don't know, Meredith Hall is a producer at Ultimerse. She does a variety of tasks, one of which obviously is marketing, because that's kind of why we're here to talk about that. But her and her team is currently making a VR game called Paperville Panic. Now, this game is about a town of paper, of all things, that catches on fire. And you as a player have to go around and find all these things while things are burning down and put it out. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell as far as what Meredith does, what the game is about. But I'm not doing her or the game any justice at all. So, Meredith, the floor is yours. Please share a little bit more about yourself, about the game, of course, and, what you like to do outside of work, because as much fun as it is for you to work at your day job, I'm sure there's other things you like to do outside of that.
Definitely. So like you said, I'm the producer at Ultimerse. So a lot of my job is basically giving my team the best opportunity to get things done as quickly and efficiently as possible while still the quality that we need. And then a lot of the peripheral roles, so working across our marketing, working with our QA team, and looking at community management and stuff like that as well. As any indie team, you do have to all flex a little bit. So it's really, really exciting. Outside of work, I tend to spend a lot of time gaming, as anyone would, if they work in this industry. Otherwise, I play soccer, I write and play music. I think it's really important to have some hobbies that are completely separate to games. Otherwise, it is very easy for it to completely take over your life. I spend time with my partner and the right time annoying my pets, really.
Nice. Now, I'm horrible with this. I used to play hockey, but I know really nothing about soccer. But what position did you play, or do you play?
So I tend to play in defense. I very much, for whatever reason, just like to run at people, and a lot of that is involved in defense. So probably says a lot about my approach to marketing as well. So
Awesome. I was a defenseman myself, so that's
yes.
Good position. All right.
Yeah, needs to be more of us.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to even take this a little bit further with the Q box round. And what that is, it's the question box round. It's a series of random questions that I prepared for Meredith. She has a slight idea of what they are, but we're just going to go to it. And basically, Meredith, I want you to answer these as quick as possible. And if you feel you need to elaborate a little bit, go ahead and do so. Are you ready?
Okay, I'm ready.
All right. Favorite video game of all time?
Overwatch. I have a tattoo of Divas on me, so I think I would be in trouble if I said anything else.
Okay, fair enough. Dogs or cats?
Oh, I have a dog and a cat. I can't choose my favorite child. I won't do it.
Okay, fair enough. How long have you had them?
I've had my cat nearly 5 years,
Okay.
and a Labrador and a pain in the butt.
Okay. I think I got most of it. It sounded like we're cutting out, but I think we're still good to go. Okay, so you had the cat for five
Okay.
years?
Yes, cat for 5 years, and our dog is about a year and a half old. She's a black Labrador and a total doofus.
Nice. All right. What's one thing that motivates you every day?
My team, 100%, and how passionate they are.
Awesome. All right. Name one of your childhood fears.
I was actually really freaked out by the idea of house fire, which is really ironic considering I'm now working on a fire game. But
Wow. Yeah. I can relate a little bit because growing up, at least when I was in high school, I had a house fire as well. So I can
oh
definitely,
gosh.
yeah, understand what that's like or whatever. It's from a toaster. So note to everybody out there, if you have an old toaster, make sure you unplug it when you leave.
Yeah.
All right. And the last question, what is the most influential and inspiring game for you?
Loaded question. I guess
Right.
recently I would say Firewatch. That really affected me for a long time and told me a lot about the sort of games that I want to make
Mm.
in terms of that narrative driven experience. Otherwise, when I was really young, there was a Xena game I used to play on PlayStation 1 that
Like
I loved
Xena,
because it was,
like Princess
yeah, Warrior
Warrior?
Princess.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and it was and like super enjoyable and had a really like interesting story and captured all these things I loved about the show and had this female protagonist. It was awesome. I think it shaped a lot about what I love in games.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I mean, what was it? Lucy Lawless played in the series and everything, and
Hmm.
I honestly couldn't think of a better, at least during that time, couldn't think of a better person to play that role because she was just
Oh, 100%.
freaking awesome in that.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So we got to know Meredith a little bit, but now we're really going to get digging in to the topic and why we're here today, and that is the struggles of standing out as an indie dev. All right, so basically, just to get right to the point here, whatever indie devs do, it's always going to be a struggle to stand out. And I kind of want to like kick off this conversation a bit because I think with what does standing out mean, right? Like in general, I think a lot of people just look at it as, oh, obviously to be in the forefront. And what does that mean? Well, a lot of times people just associate it with advertising and marketing, and that's how you stand out. But like from your perspective, like, what do you think is a good way to interpret this meaning a little bit differently that, indie teams can, kind of take a different approach to their business and interpreting this a little bit differently than just simply marketing?
Yeah, I think something that's really shifted, especially in the past couple of years, is how you need to market to your audience. And a lot of that is people are looking for a feeling now more than they are looking for a mechanic or a style of game. And I think at its core, all marketing and advertising needs to be about feeling. If you want a player to see your game and go, yes, I'm excited about that, you need to create the media and the space that fits that want. Because at the end of the day, the market is so saturated now, you're never going to have one game that will stand out against every single other game on the market. There's too many genres, there's too many styles. So you need to find the people who want the feeling your game gives and give them that before they even know they want it. So it's really complex. But I think if you look at any successful indie that's marketed really well, they've found that specific USP that makes their game really special, and they've found the people who are going to care about it. Just because you're screaming the loudest, no one's going to want to listen if you're not screaming about something that's relevant to them. So you really do need to take the time to understand what your audience is and focus on creating relationships with those people rather than just trying to connect with everyone that exists within the market.
No, I think that's a really good thing because, like, a lot of the times, when people are considering marketing, when they're getting into it, they're thinking about, okay, what's the audience that I need to target, right? And they could go to a certain degree. And while this stuff is still important, like, oh, what's their interest? What are their behaviors and things like that? And these are all, I think, kind of just scratching the surface in a way, because this is
Yep.
information that's available in analytics or what other sources you can get information from. But to what you're saying is essentially you really need to be even more mindful of what your audience is, and not just behaviors that are being tracked and analyzed, but it's really coming down to having empathy and a true understanding for your audience. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, analytics, if any of us were distilled down to a profile, there are probably a lot of things about that profile we disagree with, especially because the way that we all consume the internet is so just staggered and all over the place. And I think you need to go beyond that and find the communities that are having the sort of discussions that your game uh, explores and that your gives a certain type of experience, and make sure that you are being present in those conversations and in those spaces to really understand what people are looking for out of those experiences.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Now, there's something else that while I was preparing these questions, it got me thinking, and kind of, especially with what we're kicking off here and defining, what standing out means. And while I was doing this, one thing that came to mind that was very apparent, there's this book that I read called Good to Great. It's by Jim Collins. And basically what he did was, it was kind of a project that he funded himself. He hired a bunch of researchers and colleagues of his, and he gave them one task, which was, I want you to, and anybody who's even thinking about reading this book totally should. It's doesn't have anything to do with game dev, but it can be applied in a lot of ways. But basically what he had his team do is, he looked at the stock exchange of all the companies there, and he said, hey, I want you in a 15, I think it was a 15-year time span, it could have been 30, but in that time span, I want you to find out the companies that had exponential, amazing, kick-ass growth. And what his teams found was there were only 11 companies in that time span that, there's obviously other requirements too, but in that time span met these requirements where they showed exponential, unparalleled growth. And what it boiled down to is that all these 11 companies had the same things in common, and it came down to culture. It came down to like empathy. I'm really simplifying what they found, but it was really interesting. So as we move forward with this conversation, because I know I'm taking it in a kind of a different approach than what a lot of people would generally think, because I know one of the things we're going to be talking about is funding, and obviously funding helps you stand out. And along with sustainability, and then obviously there's marketing. But from that kind of description of the book and how these companies stood out from those like factors such as culture and everything, how do you think that's important for indie devs? Like, from a completely different perspective of standing out on those fronts, because to me, to some degree, and I think what this book explains a little bit, is having those things in place really helps shapes and molds and sets up your company, especially as an indie dev, for success. So I know it's a little bit long-winded there, but I'm just wondering, how is that a way that people could take certain things like culture, empathy, and a lot of other good business practices that can help them stand out?
Yeah, it's interesting you bring it up because a big focus for me personally, especially here and across the industry in general, is on studio culture. And the reality is, whether it's good for your business or not, we're in a society that people talk, and if you are creating an environment that is toxic for your team, or they're not being heard, or they're not having a good experience, one, you run the risk of losing some really good talent, but two, you run the risk of them leaving, and actually slowly your company will decay from the inside out. And it doesn't matter how good your game is if you don't have a team that trusts each other and can work together to make it. So I think, there is this big struggle within any indie between the creative side of the work, the business side of the work, and then the culture side of work. And if indies don't manage to get their head around all three parts, whichever one or two